Hello and welcome to the Negotiating with IT podcast. Each week we bring you education, interviews, and insights all about how you can reduce your IT software expenses through negotiation and cost reduction strategies. This show is brought to you by the Negotiator Guru. We help companies reduce their IT software expenses by 10 to 50% through contract negotiation. We are experts in negotiating with Microsoft, Salesforce, Oracle, SAP, telecom providers, and other software vendors. Reach out to us at thenegotiator.guru for a free review of your contract. We will take a look at your contract at no cost and let you know if there is opportunity for reduction. Again, you can contact us at thenegotiator.guru. That's .guru. And now let's dive into the show. All right, Dan, so the topic for today is, yes, you can negotiate with Salesforce. You know, when we talk to a lot of companies, I don't think they realize how much you can actually negotiate or the saving potential here, or they're just afraid it's going to hurt their relationship with Salesforce. So curious just to kind of hear your thoughts on this, or just what like Salesforce actually expects, or just how to go about negotiations.
Yeah, Salesforce is a supplier, much like all the other large IT software suppliers like Microsoft and otherwise, that truly expects you to negotiate. Most customers that we deal with actually don't know you can negotiate, or if they try to negotiate, they're largely unsuccessful because they don't know necessarily how to do it or how to navigate the whole process. So they expect it. It's not a negative thing, right? What's important to do is focus on mutual value versus just a lower price, and that's what gets them excited. The margin of reduction could be anywhere from 15 to 50%, quite frankly, within software deals, and Salesforce is no different.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think that there's a lot of fear that people have, you know, or when we talk to people, they're like, so Salesforce must hate you because you come in and you lower their rates, and that's kind of what a lot of our business is based around. But ultimately, as you said, they're mutually beneficial is something that I don't think a lot of people realize, that there's ways you can actually structure this deal that lowers your price and actually get Salesforce what they want. And I know we're definitely going to dive into that deeper in some later interviews, but maybe just kind of like sprinkle some examples of what that could look like.
Yeah, this goes into outcomes-based contracting. And ultimately, one of the examples, if you'd like one, is creating a press release on behalf of Salesforce and the client. So if I were to work for Johnson & Johnson, for example, right, and I had a Salesforce.com instance, we could talk about how Salesforce is making it easier for Johnson & Johnson to operate globally. And as a result, that can create uptick in sales and other clients.
Yeah, and that's something, again, I think a lot of people just don't even realize that simple bargaining chip there, just something you can use, and there's a handful of different elements of that, whether term length or anything along those lines.
That's right. It's pretty easy, but you need to know what to say and how to say it and when to say it. And we'll get into that, I think, more. But the approach is very important in how you speak to these software companies, specifically Salesforce.com, because they are so growth-oriented, more so than many other suppliers that you deal with on any day. They will automatically book in a 10% increase on your revenue, even if you're an existing customer, year over year. And if they don't hit it, then the sales rep has repercussions for the same.
So in general, you know, for people, if they are looking to go into a negotiation with Salesforce, you know, what is the actual potential? I mean, how much can you actually reduce the costs here? If you were to look at like percentages, you know, or maybe some examples from the past deals, like, you know, what is the overall percentage or ability to actually reduce these contracts?
On average, I'd say it's 15 to 30%. It could be up to 50%. You know, the average discount for a job well done, let's call it, in Salesforce would be about a 20 to 25% discount off of list. Anything more than that would be a result of some expert negotiation tactics in addition to outcomes-based negotiation tactics, which we specialize in. So,
yeah, that's one thing that I know when a lot of customers come to us, they think they have a great discount because Salesforce automatically, they have their list and then they already discount people. But we've found that even when they have that initial discount in from list, it's, you know, we're able to go in there and negotiate a lot lower than just what their actual, even what their discount is.
That's right. And it's amazing still how many people pay list. Salesforce, by design, has developed its sales organization so that the sales rep doesn't fully understand what the rates should be per client, and ultimately creating this whole concept of a business desk, which McKinsey created and taught Microsoft a long time ago. Microsoft has taught all the other software providers, and that's where we are today.
This is a big one. I know whenever we have companies come to us and they're in a negotiation, or they're about to go into one, or they're annoyed or frustrated in Salesforce, we're always having to kind of explain how their sales machine operates and like their whole dynamic in the games they play. And so maybe if you can give us some overview and just some of the pointers on how they actually operate as a company and sell.
I'd be happy to. Yeah, they focus on a 10% increase on every existing customer. It's just that simple. If you're going into a renewal, right, we'll talk about two different scenarios here, right? One is a new customer, and the second is an existing customer, right? So let's talk about a new customer first. A new customer, they're going to sell you everything that they can, much like a used car salesman would with these extended insurance policies and all this other thing, right? Just because, two reasons. One, they want to create as big a footprint as possible inside of your organization, right, to make it as sticky as possible. That allows them to have longer term revenue, right? One. Two, sales incentive targets are different for new customers than existing customers, which we can talk about later. And then three, with new customers, they're basically going to have you prepay for licenses you don't need. And so, Jake, a term that you came up with, which actually I really like, is this right size, right price. And that's exactly what you need to do right from the beginning, even if you're a new customer. Because the bottom line is, a new customer, you're going to buy more licenses than you need. Almost everyone does it. And the reason that is not necessarily because you don't know how many employees you have that need licenses. But the fact of the matter is that the adoption rate is always slower than people think. And so it's important that you actually create a roadmap of what you think is real as far as how people will adopt using the tool over a 1 to 3, 4 year period.
So you're saying that their reps get higher commission rates for bringing on a new customer. So whenever you're new, they're pretty going to be ruthless. They're going to try to sell you everything they can. Versus the renewal, they might be a little less pushy because they're not getting as much out of that. But that new customer, that rep knows the more they get you to buy, the better.
That's right. And, every business is like this if you think about it. It's much harder to get new clients than keep old ones. And so the sales targets understand that, and they represent that. Based on my contacts, experience, otherwise, it's anywhere from 2 to 10 basis points above what they'd call a renewal customer, an existing customer, for the same products, if that makes sense. So they are heavily incentivized to front load you as much as possible.
How are they operating when it comes to that renewal? And they like you said, they're already planning to book that 10% increase in your account. But what other things are they thinking about when it comes to renewal? Yeah,
they're thinking about a multitude of factors, and it really depends on sometimes the professional maturity of your sales reps as well, how long they've been around Salesforce, what accounts they've been on, and how much they know your account specifically. But in general, right, we'll talk about a few different things. One is they want to keep the baseline revenue the same at a bare minimum, if not increase by 10%, which is their target. The worst case scenario for them, so I'll say the same thing a little bit differently in different words. The worst case scenario for them is they can lose $1 on your account. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but that's literally the truth. If they lose $1 on the account, they have to tap into their sales incentive funds, which is basically a pot of money every sales rep gets to distribute to their discretion across their accounts to do one of two things. Either grow the account or keep the account the same. Obviously, they're more incentivized to grow accounts, so they like to invest those funds specifically in growth accounts versus to save. So if you're in a situation where you have a declining user pool, or you're discontinuing products that you don't need, like a part out, etc., then they will try their damnedest to reinvest those funds into other products in Salesforce so that the revenue stays flat.
If, say, that someone that's happening, we've had a lot of customers where, say, they're dropping Pardot or they're dropping support or something. If you're in that situation of dropping one of those products, they're going to try to push you to reinvest those funds. How do you typically handle that to make sure that you're not going to end up in a terrible spot or they're going to jack up your rates? Is there a better way to handle that conversation if you are going to drop a product there?
Well, the first thing you have to do is prioritize your wants and needs inside of the client, right? So it's not just if you're in a situation where you're going to grow your user base by 20% every year, right? It actually might make sense to just reinvest those funds, reinvest that dollar attribution that you're taking away from Pardot in your example, right, into new licenses because you need the growth anyway, right? That it gives us a lot more flexibility and freedom to operate inside of Salesforce because the levers are much easier to pull. If you're in a situation where you're actually declining and you no longer need any sort of applications like Pardot and you also are declining your user base, then we have to basically make a custom negotiation plan that focuses specifically on the wants and needs of the client and Salesforce.
You have talked in the past about just how the reps have limited information by design, and again, like the Microsoft and the McKinsey playbooks here. And let's maybe dive into that piece of just how they're actually structured, what your rep actually knows, what they don't know, and just how to understanding like the structure of your rep and how they fit into the Salesforce machine there.
Yeah, the Salesforce machine. That's perfectly put, actually. There are multiple levels to the Salesforce machine, and the rep, who's your day-to-day contact, is at the lowest level, and quite frankly, kept out of most true information by design. So there's a few different things I wanted to discuss in this point. One is the sales reps are not empowered to do two things. One, understand where your rates should be. Of course, they have local knowledge based on what their other accounts are, but they don't know the price book, if you will, per account. That's by design so that they can have a very organic and rational conversation with you, and they can personalize the relationship and personalize the account, and so that they can go to bat at this elusive concept called the business desk, right? Which Microsoft is brilliant for as well, and Salesforce learned everything they did from Microsoft, where the business desk, which is this higher upper echelon, kind of mid-tier between the executives and the salespeople, right, are the actual decision makers on what rates and what programs the client can receive. And so the account rep has to go to bat, if you will, to the business desk. And the business desk is this elusive entity that says yes or no. And so that the sales rep can go to you, the client, and say, I'm trying the best I can. This is the best I can get. This is the last and final offer. I've done everything I can. To the point where if you get the real good ones, they'll get real emotional about it and make it a very personal, humanizing effort, right? Which is sometimes done with true intent of saying, I've tried everything I can. Sometimes it's perhaps a little bit more tricky with people, but because they've been around the block a few times, they know how the games are played. But especially the younger account reps, they just don't understand what levers that can be pulled because they're not empowered with that information.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you've talked about in the past of part of really properly negotiating with them is to train those reps how to go and talk to those upper levels or what to say to them. And it's an interesting dynamic to think you're training your rep on how to work with their own company, but that's, and like you said, in a lot of ways to get the best results there.
Yes. Part of the plan here is to create a negotiation plan specifically for our clients. But what that really translates into is what messages are we going to send to our account rep at what time throughout the process. And they're strategically placed because what it's going to be doing is empowering the business rep to send the right messages that are highly strategic to the business desk at the right time in the negotiation to get the most value out of that business desk because they have a playbook and we know it. Except that's simple.
And in terms of their playbook, one of the other things that I know tends to happen, especially as accounts start to get bigger, is these divide and conquer tactics and the whining and dining and just the chaos they create within the organization. And I'm curious if you want to maybe elaborate more on just what some of those tactics are. And we hear this so many times with our clients where we get on the phone where the Salesforce admin is annoyed because they just keep going around them to other people. But as you said, this is by intention.
By intention, by design, everything. And it's not even just your account rep that'll do this. It's actually different levels inside of Salesforce that are going to attack different levels inside of your organization, purely by design, in the interest of divide and conquer, to get all the information from different sources, marry it up behind the scenes so they get a true view of what your organization looks like. And they'll likely know more about what your organization looks like and what your needs are than you do, especially when you're part of a larger organization. That's no fault to you as a Salesforce admin if that's who you are, right? But it's simply that they have more people talking to different levels of the organization. And as a result, they can send different messages at different times to create the biggest account that they can.
Yeah, and then like you've said, they'll go up to the C-level, they'll go to the Salesforce admins, they'll go down to the user base and just try to get the frustrations of different people and use that story to basically create this chaos so that, instead of you knowing what you want and what you want to buy, they're basically suddenly saying, well, these people want this and these people want this, and they start throwing all these things at you. And you basically no longer have a plan on what you want with Salesforce. And now they're creating this for you, and you're negotiating on what products you want instead of on price.
That's exactly right. They create a roadmap for you, and then all of a sudden you're on your heels trying to figure out, wait a second, is that actually what we need? Who said that? All this good stuff, right? Which is just a big time suck and an energy suck, right? So that's exactly right. And they specifically target, in the larger accounts, they specifically target the C-level. And they wine and dine the C-level. You're exactly right. Be expecting tickets to baseball games, football games, real big accounts, private jets, all this other stuff, right? So that essentially they'll sell them the vision, but they don't actually tell them how much it costs or what is actually needed to get to that vision or how long it'll take. But they'll sell them the vision. And as a result, when you have the vision and the executives get excited and they don't have a lot of time, they're going to say, yep, that sounds good. And then they'll sign up the organization for something they don't even actually know what they need.
So one of the things you talked about is just this, Salesforce doing a lot of wining and dining with the C-level, and as they divide and conquer, offering the baseball tickets, all this kind of stuff. One of the things you mentioned is that it's in our past conversations is that you can really kind of give them communication points and use that to your advantage instead of weakness. So can you maybe elaborate on that a bit?
Originally, when I was starting my Salesforce negotiation journey, I used to try to tell executives to keep their mouths shut, and that didn't work so well. For two reasons. One, executives don't like being told that. The second is it's very difficult for them to actually do that when they pick up the phone and want to talk about their business. So instead of telling them no, don't talk, we actually use a converse approach and actually give them a plan of action so that they can feel part of the negotiation. Almost all the time, executives are happy to follow a plan as long as they know that there is a plan in place and they know why they're doing something, right? So actually, in the large negotiations, we'll actually tell people, say, you know what? Depending on what your personal preference is, you can go to the baseball game, the basketball game, football game, whatever with them. Absolutely. But here's the thing. Here's what you're not going to say, and here's what you are going to say, and here's how you're going to say it. And we give them a plan of action on how to do that. And I'll tell you, Salesforce is left dumbfounded because they realize that the organization is so well aligned internally that there's no divide and conquering going to happen. And they also understand who's in charge of the overall deal. Usually a Salesforce.com admin, as an example, or someone of that effect would be in charge of responsible for the relationship. What's very important is that the executives empower the Salesforce admin or whoever the lead is and say, listen, this is their decision. We fully support.
Yeah, that's one of the other things you've talked about is making sure that, that Salesforce understands that, whether it's the CIO or it's the admin or the CFO, that they truly believe that the main person that they're negotiating with is truly the final decision maker and is controlling that deal. And a lot of times they won't believe that, especially if it's a Salesforce admin, they're going to believe that the CIO or someone else is that, which is why they try to create those tactics. But if you can get those communication points aligned and create that whole story, it makes them realize that Salesforce admin or the CIO or the CFO or whoever is that point of conversation is really guiding it, and everyone is aligned with what they have to say.
That's right. We're not using any malicious tactics here. All we're doing is aligning the organization, specifically what they need and want, and so that everyone can speak from one voice. And that is easier said than done, especially in larger organizations with cultures that allow others to speak freely, which is great, but not so great when you're negotiating with a big software vendor like Salesforce.
Yeah, and that's our whole next episode here is going to be on building the internal roadmap and getting that alignment. But before we get into that one, I want to hit two more points on how Salesforce operates. One of which is just their annual fiscal year. And if you want to kind of elaborate on that, because I know every time come around the end of January, there's a lot of renewals happening, a lot of offers for discounts or people trying to crunch in that revenue. And curious if you can elaborate on just how they operate or how that time of year changes for them.
The Salesforce hustle, I call it.
That's a good phrase for it. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Their fiscal year ends the end of January, okay, of every year. And if you don't have a lot of experience negotiating IT contracts, you'd probably think that's pretty weird. Because it is, actually. It is kind of weird. Who has a fiscal year that ends the end of January, right? How random. It's done intentionally, and I'll tell you why here. It's done because corporate budgets, again, who are their target market, corporate budgets are solidified and closed in December, right? And so what they'll try to do is they will try to capture as much end-of-year budget as they can that can be reenacted in January so that they've got 3 weeks more to capture more budget after the fiscal year starts for their clients. So let me repeat that. They're going to capture money. Let's just say right now, it's February 16th, 2018, right now. In December 2017, they were looking to capture as much budget from the IT budget as possible using a 2017 budget. They are also looking to capture as much January 2018 money because they know, because they're experts on how corporate America works, they know that there's a new coffer of money available come January based on how the budgeting process works. So they'll play games to find the most money possible to appease their clients' budgeting frustrations as well, which everybody has them.
Yeah, so it's almost playing the game that, the people that either have the leftover budget from 2017 that they're needing to spend, they can capture as much of that. Or they just, right when that new budget's available in January, they capture it then. And that's why sometimes they push for that December and they try to get it in before the end of the year. And sometimes they almost stall it or wait until last minute in January and then push for it then.
That's right. And generally speaking, people have the most money come January of every year, right? That's just how it works. Think about if you get a $100,000 check, you spend a lot up front, and then you realize that you don't have as much come September, October, November, December, right? Depending on what your IT budget is, you're essentially filled up in January. And that's exactly when they're trying to hit you, when you're cash rich, okay? And that's why they started it originally. And quite frankly, it works for them. And I think it's a brilliant business strategy, but it's our job to protect our clients to not fall into that trap.
Another final point I want to hit on here is where we're wrapping this one up here is just we've had some of our customers who have been with Salesforce for a longer period of time. They may have been with them for 5 years or so. And they express frustrations in the product name changes, the SKU changes, and just kind of these, different things that keep changing every couple of years. And they say this product looks the same, but suddenly the price point's different. And it's kind of the chaos that they make every year or two by just adding or changing these new products or shifting stuff around. If maybe you just want to elaborate on that and kind of the games they play there. I know this is one out of the Microsoft playbook as well there.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, they do this for a lot of different reasons. One is primarily what you just said, just create massive confusion so that they can try to upsell the situation, right? It also confuses their sales reps as much as it confuses the clients sometimes, quite honestly, to no fault of their own, other than just trying to catch up with what a SKU has from a functionality versus not. So it's ultimately intended so that on the positive side of things, customers get the most up-to-date technology possible, right? They have it as the large technology uplift. On the downside is, generally speaking, there's one of two things happening. It'll cost more money, the new SKU, right? And two, you'll be buying technology you don't necessarily need. So it's very important that you understand what actual technology you need before you buy it. And you got to get in the weeds and understand and be on top of this stuff constantly, because if you're not talking to Salesforce every day, you're not staying on top of these things, it's impossible to know.
And Dan, let's just talk on, first of all, why this is so important to have that roadmap and alignment before you start the negotiation. Can you just elaborate on the importance of this here?
It's extremely important, I'll tell you, because we were talking about the divide and conquer tactics in, I believe, the previous episode, and how they'll attack the top, they'll attack the middle, and they'll attack the bottom of your organization. they'll create this story in the background that where in their perfect world, they'll know more about you, the client, than you actually do, you being whoever's in charge of that contract. And so that they can sell appropriate at different times at different levels. The roadmap is one of our primary defenses against that, in addition to our communication plan, which we can talk about later. But the roadmap is specifically identifying two things. It's identifying products and it's identifying time. Those are two very different elements. The products is what you need. Pretty obvious, right? But it's not just as simple as, oh, well, I need 100 Salesforce Enterprise, Sales Cloud licenses, unlimited, etc. It's actually why you need it, right? So are you sure you need an enterprise versus an unlimited versus, right, a premier support versus non? We're specifically challenging the actual utilization of that product so that we're actually right-sizing the account, okay? The other axis on the roadmap is time. Again, not complicated, and this stuff can't be complicated or people don't get it, right? It's time. When do you actually need the implementation of those products or services to start? Very often, a Salesforce deal is usually about 3 years, right? Sometimes 1 year, sometimes 5, but kind of the standard is 3 years. And so what's very, very common for Salesforce is to sell you products before you actually need to start using them. And they'll start billing you right away. And they're incentivized to do that, the sales rep. And so basically it's a time-bound roadmap to products that are both right-sized and right-priced. That's the roadmap process. And so what we do is we start with creating a basic table format with our end client, whoever's accountable for the contract negotiation on the client side. We extract everything from their brain that they know that they need over the next 3 to 5 years, okay? We try to always keep a 5-year roadmap in our mind. Even if we're doing a 3-year deal, it's very important that we understand what happens in years 1 and 2 after that deal closes, right? So that we understand if there's going to be growth or decline. And so, as a result, once we extract what they know about the account, then it does two things. One, it shows where the holes are, right? What they don't know. And because generally speaking, they don't think about it because they're in charge of the firefighting every day. If you're like a Salesforce.com admin, that's your primary day job. But it also creates a visual now in which that individual can share and distribute very easily. It can be a PowerPoint or a spreadsheet, distribute across the organization and gather the intel from the individual stakeholders that are in charge of a specific product. I'll give you a key example. Pardot in the marketing group, right? The Salesforce.com admin may not actually know what they need, but the marketing group is actually in charge of managing and monitoring that application on Salesforce. And so it's just a tool and template in which they can easily distribute and capture information across the organization. That allows us to speak from one voice.
Yeah, and that's the such the important piece of it is just that, like you said, speaking from one voice, because when you go into those negotiations and you're flip-flopping around or you don't have all that alignment, that's when their divide and conquer works. Or that's when you start going back and forth on what products you want or what licenses, and suddenly every revision of your proposal isn't on price, but on just what products you need. Versus, when you have that alignment, you have that roadmap, you're decided, it puts you in that ability to really go in there and negotiate each time on price.
You got it. Spot on. And it is a rarity for clients to be able to speak from one voice and have 100% alignment. That is a rarity. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it is extremely rare for clients to have a roadmap created prior to even starting a negotiation. And that's exactly our process. Not rocket science, but a disciplined process that basically ensures the client is aligned prior to us even saying hi to the account executive at Salesforce.
Let's talk on that of how you actually get that alignment, because that sometimes probably sounds easier and better than it is. But say you're an admin or you're a CIO or you're a CFO and you need the alignment of the CIO or the CFO, or you need the alignment of your Salesforce admin. You're trying to get all these people on the same page. How do you go about that process of actually getting that internal alignment on your roadmap before that negotiation?
like we said, we extract what our primary contact knows, right? We always have one specific contact at the client and who's accountable for our relationship, but ultimately the relationship with Salesforce, okay? And we extract what they know. We identify the missing pieces, and then basically from those missing pieces, then we give a list of homework items to our key contact to go out and identify who's the owner of the products as well as what they need. And then basically slightly influence a conversation before maybe it naturally might happen inside of an organization to get all of our facts straight. And then, depending on the complexity of the client, right? We have to speak in general terms here, but if we're doing a lot of complex deals, which we've done quite a bit of, then we could actually go and visit the CIO or the C-suite, talk through the different options, and basically create that alignment just through the buy-in and the rationality of the C-suite.
Going to them with that plan, getting that feedback, going through that piece by piece, each person, before you ever get to that negotiation, so that you have that alignment before you actually get to that negotiation piece.
Yeah, I mean, listen, 80% of negotiation is just planning. The 20% is the execution and the implementation, but everybody focuses on the 20%. Everybody forgets the 80%, right? The 80% is the heaviest lift. And so what we put a great deal of emphasis on the preparation prior to even giving a single instance of our wants and needs and requirements to Salesforce, because we have everything aligned prior. Now, of course, there's things that could change throughout the negotiation, but it doesn't matter. We have a plan of action, everyone agrees to it, and we're ready to move forward.
Nice, and that is the topic of the next episode for the preparing for negotiation, as we start talking about those wants and needs, as we start talking about those communication points for each person in the organization. So
important.
Yeah, super important. So that's topic of our next episode, and we'll be diving into that next.
Great, thanks.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you got a lot of value out of this show. If you need help reducing your IT software costs, then reach out to us at thenegotiator.guru for a free review of your contract. We will take a look at your contract at no cost and let you know if there's an opportunity for cost reduction. Again, you can contact us at thenegotiator.guru. That's .guru.